March 3, 1979, 2150, Corvallis, Oregon. 5 friends leave Gill Coliseum after a college game. Their plan is simple: drive east, get home, rest for a tournament at dawn. The car runs well. Roads look clear near town. 30 miles out, snow hardens and wind rises. At 22:21, a fuel receipt logs a stop in Albany. Then the trail goes crooked across logging country. What happened to Aaron Hale and his friends that night? 17 weeks later, a remote cabin will raise more questions than answers. One lowered window in sub-zero wind changes everything tonight. They were not drifters. Miguel Carter, 30, drove a 1974 Torino, blue and white, maintained with care. He hated back roads in winter. Ben Foster, 29, lived with his parents and kept lists for everything. Tyler Knox, 24, loved routine and scheduled snacks for game nights. Ethan Ward, 32, volunteered for Special Olympics and never missed church on Sundays. Aaron Hale, 25, managed a psychiatric condition with medication and was stable for months. They moved as a unit. They celebrated wins and drove home. The timeline begins in a lot packed with orange and black jackets. Tip-off ended near 21:45. Miguel guided the Torino out of Gill Coliseum and pointed to US 20. A cashier in Albany remembered 5 men at 22:21. Hostess pies. Chocolate milk. 2 sodas. A road atlas with a fold near Santiam Junction. The receipt now carries the case tag EV, or 1979-012. It is a clean datum. The next step is not. The Torino was found 4 days later, July 3, 1979, off NF12, Deschutes National Forest, about 58 miles from the arena. A ranger noted the car was unlocked. The left rear window was down 1/3. Keys missing. Engine turned over on the first try. A quarter tank remained. No dents. Tire pressure looked even by gauge. The odometer matched a direct route plus a short spur. Snack wrappers in the front seat. A map creased to the east. There were no signs of a crash. Night conditions on March 3 were hostile above 4,500 feet. Winds 20 to 30 miles per hour. Air temperature between 14 degrees Fahrenheit and 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Dry powder snow drifted across open spurs and thinned under trees. Searchers saw faint shoe patterns near the berm, then nothing. Fresh snowfall erased lines before teams could grid the area. Radios cracked with coordinates and came back with negatives. Families did not wait. Foster's father organized flyers in Corvallis by noon March 4. Ward's pastor opened the church hall for volunteers. A SAR captain mapped a 3-mile radius from the car and then doubled it. USFS crews checked snow parks, pump houses, and winterized cabins. Santiam Pass patrols asked truckers for dash notes. Friends described habits that built a narrow path of expectations. Miguel never risked his car on a closed spur. Tyler feared the dark woods. Ben called his mother if he would be late by more than an hour. Ethan set his church alarm for 6 o'clock every Sunday. Aaron kept his pillbox in his jacket and did not skip doses on trip days. None of those patterns fit a detour into logging snow at midnight. The official line formed fast. They got lost, took the wrong fork, and abandoned the car in panic. The math pushed back. The engine started. Fuel remained. The left rear window was down in freezing wind. No one smashed the ignition. The front end was clean of ice. The car could roll out under its own power. If fear drove them, why leave the only heated shelter they controlled? There were odd edges. A plastic whistle under the driver's seat did not match any family account. A folded trail brochure for Jack Creek turned up in the glove box with no store stamp. The Atlas crease pointed beyond Santiam Junction, yet the odometer suggested a shorter spur. A ranger saw prints near a service gate where a charity group, the High Desert Ski Foundation, staged equipment the prior week. The group had permits and clean books. Their name, though, kept repeating in interviews. 17 weeks later, an off-road rider would find a warming cabin marked JCK4. Inside lay an answer and a new wall of doubt. And Aaron's trail would break again where we needed it most. Families filled in the gaps that paper could not. Miguel Carter woke early on Sundays to wash the Ford Torino by hand. He logged oil changes on index cards. He avoided unplowed roads and never let the fuel drop under a quarter tank. Ben Foster called his mother if he was running 30 minutes late. He placed his wallet and house key on the same hall table every night. Tyler Knox feared getting lost after dark and carried a pocket flashlight. Ethan Ward set church clothes out on Saturday nights. Aaron Hale took his medication with milk at dinner and kept a spare dose in his jacket. I met Ben's mother in 2019 at her small kitchen table. The clock ticked like a metronome while she opened his calendars. She kept the tournament flyer in a laminated sleeve. She circled March 4, 1979, in red. She said he would never miss that date. She did not raise her voice, but her certainty was a fixed point. The final verified moves are narrow and time-stamped. At 21:50 on March 3, 1979, the game let out at Gill Coliseum in Corvallis, Oregon. Miguel steered toward US 20. At 22:21, a cashier in Albany recorded the receipt now labeled EV, or 1979-012. It listed 2 pies, 2 sodas, and chocolate milk. The cashier remembered a folded road atlas with where near Santiam Junction. She remembered a small joke about weather. After that, the trail split into speculation and snow. The Torino appeared on July 3, 1979 off NF 12 in Deschutes National Forest. The car was unlocked. The left rear window was rolled down 1/3. Keys were gone. The engine started on the first attempt. Tire pressure looked normal. 1/4 tank of fuel remained. Snack wrappers sat in the passenger footwell. A trail brochure for Jack Creek lay in the glove box without a store stamp. No damage. No stuck axle. No reason it could not drive out. The official theory formed quickly. They got lost, panicked, and walked into the timber. The evidence pushed back. The car worked. The gas was enough. The window was down in sub-freezing wind. A whistle under the driver's seat did not match family items. It was a small, clean object. It bothered the deputy who logged it. Small things often do. Searchers worked a growing box around the car. DCSO and USFS mapped a 3-mile radius, then doubled it. Teams used compass bearings, measuring tape, and grease pencils on plastic overlays. They logged coordinates and returned with negatives. Snow fell and erased prints. Helicopters swept edges when wind allowed. Radios called grid lines and returned nothing. SAR commanders paused the hunt once storms advanced and visibility collapsed. Patterns from daily life contradicted a winter detour. Miguel hated closed spurs. Tyler avoided tree lines at night. Ben would have called home from a phone in Gates or Detroit Lake if delayed. Ethan would have told his pastor he missed service for a reason. Aaron kept to a pillbox schedule and had not missed medication in months. Those habits were simple, but in simple habits people live. If cases like this matter to you, consider subscribing. It helps more families push cold cases forward. Investigators tested simple routes. A trooper drove the US 20 corridor in similar weather. He recorded times, fuel, and temperatures. He avoided side spurs and noted where drifts formed. None of his numbers matched a reason to take NF12. A separate team measured tire impressions near the find. Width and spacing matched the Torino. They stopped near a service gate and then vanished under fresh powder. The print pattern suggested a brief pause. It did not suggest spinning or panic. Why did the car stop there? A gate nearby served a non-profit with winter permits, the High Desert Ski Foundation. Volunteers staged equipment the prior week. The group's books were clean. Their permit was valid. Staff logged no activity on March 3rd. Still, the name repeated in interviews around Santiam. A lodge manager heard a horn after 23:30 on a windy night. He thought it was a snowmobile, then said it was a car. He did not step outside. He later told deputies that the sound felt wrong for that hour. Too late for anyone headed home, he said. He could not add more. Deputies chased edges. Pay phones along the corridor held no calls to any of the families. A diner at Santiam Junction had closed at 2100 hours. A snowpark kiosk showed no fresh tickets. A tow log listed no midnight pulls. no one filed noise complaints. The list of negatives grew into a hard surface. The case cooled once storms burned fuel and budgets. The families kept searching. Volunteers checked pump houses, cabins, and culverts. A list of unheated structures sat by the sheriff's radio. Someone underlined warming cabin JCK4 with a pencil. Months later, a rider would take that pencil line as a trailhead. He would put his boot to the cabin door and change the file forever. Something at that cabin will explain the lowered window or make it worse. The Torino became the first piece of hard evidence. Deputies tagged it EV, or 1979-001 on March 7, 1979 at 10:12. The chain of custody shows Deschutes County Sheriff's Office to Oregon State Police Crime Lab by 1640. Technicians photographed each quadrant, bagged loose items, and pulled fluid samples. They measured tire pressures with a calibrated analog gauge: front left 30 psi, front right 30 psi, rear left 32 psi, rear right 32 psi. The owner's manual recommended 28 psi front and 30 psi rear. Slightly high, but even. Nothing suggested a slow leak or a panic spin. The engine test recorded a clean start after a 3-second crank. Idle stabilized near 750 revolutions per minute. The air temperature was 18 degrees Fahrenheit at the site, with gusts over 20 miles per hour. Snow crusted the berm. The left rear window was down 1/3, exactly 12 centimeters by the ruler in evidence photos. The ignition showed no tamper marks. The odometer reading, logged against Miguel's index card records, tracked a direct run from Corvallis to the forest spur plus a few miles. There was no mechanical reason to abandon the car. Inside, snack wrappers were dry. Seat fabric showed no water stains. A plastic whistle under the driver's seat was bagged as EV, or 1979-004. Families did not recognize it. A Jack Creek brochure without a store stamp became EV, or 1979-005. The glove box atlas had a worn fold near Santiam Junction. The fold did not prove intent, but it showed where fingers pressed the paper. The receipt from Albany, EV, or 1979-012, went to the lab the same day. Ink analysis in 1979 was basic, but notes described a dye set consistent with regional stock. In 2006, the lab re-examined it under modern imaging. They confirmed the 2221 timestamp and store imprint alignment. Oil residue on the paper's edge matched gasoline fingerprints taken from the Torino's filler neck. The match did not solve a route. It fixed a last verified moment. Investigators staged route tests. A trooper drove US 20 from Corvallis to Santiam Junction in late March under similar temperatures. He logged times every 10 miles and recorded wind speeds at exposed points. He did not turn onto an NF12. Another team, using a comparable Torino, drove from Albany to the NF12 gate in clear weather to capture a best-case time. Their notes showed that even on a good night, the spur was slow. None of the tests justified turning into a closed winter road with a careful driver behind the wheel. OSP modeled a drift scenario on paper maps. They overlaid wind direction, slope, and timber breaks. The model predicted deeper powder on open spurs after 2,300 hours. Under trees, crust stayed thin. The search logs fit that pattern. Faint prints near the berm in shade vanished on the sunny edge. A pause near a service gate was consistent with a short stop. It was not consistent with a stuck vehicle. There were small surprises. A faint smear on the driver's door tested as pine resin, not oil. A wool fiber on the rear seat did not match clothing later collected from the family's laundry baskets. A boot scuff on the passenger sill was deeper than the others. The scuff angle suggested someone braced a foot while leaning out. That fact lined up with the lowered rear window and the cold wind that night. Deputies checked the corridor for outside contacts. No payphones logged calls to the families between 22:30 and 1 o'clock. A lodge manager near Santiam later reported a single car horn after 23:30. He did not step outside. Foundation volunteers with permits for trail maintenance, the High Desert Ski Foundation, produced sign-in sheets with no entries for March 3rd. Their trucks were accounted for. Their names still repeated in nearby interviews, which kept them in the margins of the file. Families pushed for more. Foster's church organized a volunteer line to check pump houses. Ward's pastor paired drivers with USFS maps to avoid hazards. A snowpark attendant flagged unheated structures on a photocopied list. Warming cabin JCK4 was underlined twice, then penciled again after a ranger mentioned a broken latch the prior winter. That list sat by the sheriff's radio for weeks as storms clipped search windows. Detectives returned to habits, because habits narrow chaos. Miguel did not leave windows open in winter. Tyler did not lean out of moving cars. Ben did not skip calls when delayed. Ethan told people where he was going. Aaron did not miss dozes on travel days. None of those patterns answered why the Torino stopped at a gate in blowing snow. They only made the stop harder to accept. By late March, budgets tightened and fuel ran down. Helicopters stood down for wind and maintenance. Ground teams returned with negatives. The file grew with clean data that did not join. The case cooled on paper while families refused to let it cool at home. In early June, a rider would follow that underlined cabin name to a door that still moved on a swollen hinge. The push to reopen the ground search started with paper. On June 10, 1979, a deputy compared sign-in sheets from the High Desert Ski Foundation with USFS gate logs. One sheet listed a trail grooming check on March 2nd and a supply pickup plan for March 5th. The USFS gate book showed a chain lock replacement entered for March 1st and no activity after March 2nd. A name appeared on both lists with different times. The mismatch was small, but it gave detectives a reason to ask more questions. They met the Foundation's operations lead at a closed snowpark near Santiam Junction. The wind lifted crystals from plow banks and pushed them across the lot. He unlocked a storage bay and showed snow shovels, wool blankets, and a brass padlock with a bent hasp. He said, "We keep cabins stocked, if hikers get stuck." The deputy asked about March 3rd. He paused and said, "No trail work that night." He added that a volunteer had moved a truck on March 2nd and returned keys late on March 4th. The key tag number did not match the truck inventory. He said it was a clerical slip. The deputy wrote the number down twice. A lodge manager confirmed a single car horn after 23:30 on March 3rd. His notes, kept for accounting, showed he closed the register at 21:04 and left by 21:20. He said, "I heard a long beep and a short one." He thought it was a snowmobile until he heard the second tone. He did not see lights. He did not step outside. His account stayed the same in 3 interviews. Detectives reran the corridor on foot with SAR in late June. They used a calibrated wheel to measure distances from the Torino's position to the service gate, then to the nearest spur marker. 37 meters separated the car from the gate. The pause marks in the snowpack pattern, recorded back in March, aligned with that distance. They followed contour lines toward the tree line and marked a low spot where drifts would pack. The line angled toward a utility path that served 2 cabins and a pump house. Chain of custody on EV, or 1979-004, the plastic whistle, came back clean. No prints. Mold lines matched an outdoor store catalog from 1978. Families did not recognize it. A firefighter who joined SAR said the whistle pattern was common on trail teams. He did not recall any team losing one in March. A second deputy noted the whistle's threading fit a lanyard size used on ski patrol coats. The Foundation lead said their team preferred metal whistles. He could not produce a purchase log for either type in early 1979. A short exchange in the snowpark changed the tone of the interviews. A seasonal worker, off to the side, lowered his voice. "I saw a sedan near the gate past 11, he said. He described a blue and white car and a driver who leaned back like he was listening. He heard wind and then a yell. One word only, gate. He said he did not report it because he thought it was a tow. He feared losing his job for speaking out of turn. The deputy told him that saying nothing would not help now. OSP analysts compared that line to the scuff on the Torino's passenger sill. The scuff angle placed a foot braced outward. The lowered rear window aligned with someone calling or listening outside. The engine's clean start argued the battery had not been run down by long idling. The numbers still refused to explain why anyone left the only shelter they controlled. SAR Command set a new plan in 3 steps. Step 1. Verify structures within a 2-mile radius the snow model predicted. Step 2. Re-interview Foundation volunteers and check who had access to cabin stores. Step 3. Check any intermediate staging point between the gate and structures. Deputies filed a simple request to USFS for cabin lists. The response listed warming cabin J4, a small pump house, and a tool shed. The sheet noted a broken latch winter prior. Someone underlined JCK4 again. The operations lead from the Foundation provided inventory notes for cabin restocks. The March ledger had gaps. A restock line for blankets lacked a truck number. A propane entry carried a date but no signature. He called it a backlog issue and said a volunteer would fix the pages. Detectives copied the book and dated each page corner. The interview closed with one more question. Any reason a car would stop at your gate and signal? The deputy asked. The Foundation lead said, people think gates mean phones. We don't have phones out there. The seasonal worker added, sometimes we leave a lantern in a window. Not this winter. On June 28, 1979, a motorist on a dirt bike reported a wooden door that didn't feel locked near Jack Creek. He gave a rough mile count from a spur marker and a bearing by compass. The sheriff logged the call at 1542 and paged USFS and SAR. The team set a rally time for 5:30. They listed JCK4 as the priority check. The cabin door would answer one question or double the rest. The call from the rider came in on June 28, 1979 at 1542. Dispatch logged wooden door not secured and a bearing near Jack Creek. He estimated 1 mile from a spur marker but was unsure of the exact number. He mentioned a roof line just visible above the tree break. The sheriff paged USFS and SR within 3 minutes. They set a rally for 5:30 the next morning at Santiam Junction. At 5:12 on June 29th, SAR checked radios on 155.160 MHz simplex. Air temperature was 41 degrees Fahrenheit at the lot. Wind was light. Teams loaded pry bars, bolt cutters, trauma kits, and scene cameras. A deputy read the plan. Reach the cabin. Confirm safety. Preserve evidence. No one touches anything without a photo and a time. USFS provided a cabin list that placed JCK4 east of a utility path. The sheet noted an old latch issue from the prior winter. They rolled out at 5:36 in a 2-vehicle column. The first was a USFS pickup with chains. The second was a DCSO Suburban. A third truck carried a wheeled litter. By 6:04, they reached a spur gate. The chain was intact. A ranger unlocked it and relocked it behind them. They proceeded slowly to avoid ruts and fragile runoff. The GPS units were basic and unreliable under timber. They used compass bearings and counted paces. A measured wheel read distances in meters. At 6:42, the team halted at a clearing with old plow lines. The ranger pointed to a path cut into brush. He said the line was used for utilities and cabin access before winter. They found a post with faded paint and nailed tin. A hand-marked JCK4 faced the wrong direction. Someone had hammered it back on at some point. The crew checked for fresh prints. The soil was firm with needles and old crust. No clear tracks stood out. The final approach was off the vehicle route. They moved on foot with a rope line to keep spacing in sight. The cabin roof appeared at 6:57, gray and low behind a stand of fir. A small pump house sat 30 meters to the west. The ranger raised a hand and signaled a stop. The deputy read the contact steps again. Badge numbers. Time stamps. Camera on. Gloves up. The door rested against the frame on a swollen hinge. No fresh wood splinters showed around the strike. A padlock hung from a bracket, open and bent. The ranger said, "This was marked last winter." The deputy called the time, 7:06, and directed a quick perimeter scan. Windows were boarded from inside. A small pane on the leeward side showed old tape, then a single break. Someone had entered from that point at some time. The tape edges had dust. The brake looked weathered. They announced themselves and pushed the door with a pry bar to avoid leaving prints. The cabin was one room with 2 bunks, a table and shelves. The air was cool and stale. The deputy logged the first interior photos at 7:10. On the shelves sat canned goods with state labels. A Coleman stove rested near a propane line. A pile of blankets lay at the foot of the left bunk. A small clothing heap sat by the table leg. A pair of boots not matched to a specific size sat under the right bunk. They did not advance until each angle was filmed. The stove valve was closed. The propane tank was connected and showed pressure on the gauge. A box of matches was present. None looked used. Several cans were missing open marks. Cardboard cases had not been cut. The table's surface was dusty except for a cleared rectangle. A deputy photographed the rectangle and measured it. It matched the footprint of a standard ration box. A shoe on the floor caught the camera next. It was a military style, size 10, with AH marked in small letters. The deputy read the letters out loud to the recorder. He called for an evidence bag and tagged it EV, or 1979-007. He did not say the name that came into everyone's head. He read the time, 7:18, and moved the lens to the bunk. Blankets were layered thick. A sheet wrapped something rectangular along the mattress length. Another blanket covered the pillow and part of the frame. The ranger pointed to the table where someone had stacked a few canned items. There was no open tin. No heat had been used inside. No venting showed soot. The small window break looked like the entry point if someone had needed shelter fast. They cleared the pump house next. It was locked and intact. The gauge showed residual water pressure. No signs of a person inside. They returned to the cabin and widened the circle to 30 meters. They found fabric scraps near an animal trail and a disturbed patch under a deadfall. The deputy marked coordinates and flagged it for later excavation. No footprints survived the spring melt pattern. The area held the story tight. The team regrouped at the door. The deputy read the next step. Remove the top blanket. Preserve the sheet. Photograph every layer. A camera flash fired and froze a pale shape beneath. They lifted the top blanket at 7:22 and photographed the sheet. The outline under the fabric was human and still. The deputy read the time. He directed slow removal for documentation. The second camera rolled. The next layer exposed a face and shoulders. No shoes were present. The feet were wrapped. The body showed signs of prolonged exposure. No blood spatter. No weapon in view. A medic confirmed there were no signs of life. The room stayed quiet except for the camera shutter. They secured the scene and stepped back. The deputy assigned tags. The body became EV, or 1979-021. The blankets were EV, or 1979-022 through 024. The sheet was EV, or 1979-025. The boots from the floor were EV, or 1979-026. The military shoe marked stayed EV, or 1979-007. The stove remained closed and cold. The propane tank showed pressure but no use marks. Unopened canned goods lined the shelf. Matches were present and unused. There was no evidence of a fire attempt. USFS noted a broken window pane on the leeward side. Tape edges held dust. The brake looked old. It likely served as the entry point. A trail of faint fibers led from the window to the left bunk. The medic estimated the person had survived past the initial night. Weight loss and hair growth suggested weeks, not days. The team avoided statements of certainty. The coroner would speak later with measured terms. They expanded the search outside at 8:10. SAR formed a grid with 30-meter spacing. Markers flagged a disturbed area under a deadfall. A jacket fragment lay nearby. A wallet insert contained a church program with Ethan Ward's name. The deputy logged the location and bagged the items. Another team called in a find to the south. They located skeletal elements in brush near a wash. Animals had scattered the remains. The scene was treated with care and respect. By midday, 3 sites held human remains. One set lay 2 miles southwest of the cabin. Another lay within a mile east. Clothing pieces matched items described by Foster and Knox families. Dental records were requested. Each recovery was slow and exact. The chain of custody ran from SAR to DCSO to the county medical examiner. Helicopters were not used. The terrain and cover were tight. Every bag carried a time and a GPS coordinate. Back at JCK4, a technician logged the pillbox found in a jacket pocket under the table. The days of the week were marked. 2 slots were empty. The rest were full. The initials inside the lid matched Aaron Hale. Prints were partial and not suitable for comparison. The finding reinforced a narrow fact. Aaron had been inside the cabin at some point. The shoe and pillbox placed him there. His location now was unknown. Identifications came in over days. The medical examiner confirmed Ethan Ward from dental and healed childhood injuries. 2 additional identifications followed for Miguel Carter and Ben Foster. Tyler Knox was identified next. The reports listed exposure and probable starvation as primary factors for the cabin death. For the others, exposure with environmental factors was noted. There was no firearm discharge. No sharp force signs. No blunt trauma fractures. The phrasing stayed clinical and restrained. Deputies briefed families with care. Dates, distances, and personal items were presented along with limits. No one speculated on motives in those rooms. Pastors and counselors sat with parents and siblings. Memorials formed in Corvallis and at Santiam Junction. Volunteers left candles at the gate where the Torino had paused. Searchers folded their maps and shook hands. They did not call it closure. They called it a record. Investigators kept working practical leads. They rechecked the High Desert Ski Foundation. The ledger gaps remained ledger gaps. No volunteer placed himself at the gate at 23:30 on March 3rd. The seasonal worker's statement held. He heard a horn and then a yell. The whistle in the car never led to a person. The broken latch at the cabin predated the winter. No one could prove a staged rescue or a trap. The case did not return an offender. The lesson here is not dramatic. It is disciplined. If you leave a working vehicle in freezing conditions, your odds fall hard. Use heat if you have it. Use food you can open. Use shelter you can secure. Mark your route and stay together. Simple steps slow panic and buy time. Families deserve the calm version of the truth, even when it hurts. One question remains. Where did Aaron Hale go after touching that cabin door?